Thanks for clicking on this video. I really appreciate you being here. If you enjoy the story, consider subscribing and feel free to like the video or drop a comment below. It really helps the algorithm recommend these videos to you and to others who might enjoy them too. Either way, thanks for giving it a chance, and I hope it pulls you in. I'm writing this from a motel room 300 miles from Silver Creek. It is the furthest I could drive before my hands started shaking too badly to hold the wheel. I have not slept in 2 days. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. I see their faces. I see my brother's face, smiling up at me from the dark water with teeth that were not his anymore. If you live near a lake, if your water comes from a natural source, you need to pay attention to what I am about to tell you. The water is not safe, not anywhere. I do not know how far it has spread, but I know it started in Silver Creek, and I watched it take everyone I loved. I watched it take my brother, my neighbors, my friends. I watched it take an entire town and pull them down into the depths of a lake that should have been just a lake, but was something else entirely. This is not about bacteria. This is not about chemicals or contamination in any way you understand. This is about something alive, something old, something that found a way inside us through the one thing we cannot live without. My name is Dean Hartley. I am 44 years old. For over 20 years, I worked as a plumber in Silver Creek, a small town of about 5,000 people in the northern part of the state. I knew the water infrastructure of that town better than almost anyone. I knew every pipe, every valve, every connection point between the lake and the homes of my neighbors. I spent my days crawling under houses and behind walls, working with the veins and arteries that carried water through our community. I thought I understood water. I thought it was just something that flowed through pipes, something I could control with wrenches and solder and know-how, something ordinary, something safe. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. It started on a Tuesday, the last week of September. The weather had been strange that year, warmer than usual, like summer did not want to let go. I was working on a bathroom renovation at a house on Oak Street, replacing some old copper pipes that had finally given up after 40 years of service. The homeowner was an elderly widow who kept bringing me glasses of lemonade and asking if I needed anything. Normal day, quiet work, the kind of job I'd done 1,000 times before. My phone buzzed around 2 in the afternoon with an emergency alert. The screen lit up with red text. Public health advisory. Do not drink tap water until further notice. Boil all water before consumption. Additional information to follow. I rolled my eyes. These advisories came out every few years when someone found trace amounts of something in the water supply. A little too much chlorine. A minor bacterial count that exceeded some arbitrary threshold. They never amounted to anything. The town would boil their water for a few days. The health department would declare everything safe, and life would go on exactly as it had before. I finished my work, collected my payment, and drove home without giving the alert another thought. I even stopped at the gas station and filled up a water bottle from the tap there, drinking half of it on the drive home. That was the last time I drank tap water. Not because I was worried about the advisory, but because my own pipes were being replaced that week. and my water was shut off. I had been living on bottled water for days, water I had bought in bulk from a store 2 towns over. That accident is the only reason I am still myself, the only reason I am still human. That evening, I had dinner at my brother Kevin's house. It was a weekly tradition, something we had done for years since I moved back to Silver Creek after our father died. Kevin was 39, 5 years younger than me, and he had the life I always thought I would have before my marriage fell apart. A wife he loved, Beth, who he had been with since high school, 2 kids who adored him, Owen, who was 12, and Grace, who was 9. A house with a big backyard and a golden retriever named Buster, who slept on the porch and barked at squirrels. Kevin mentioned the water advisory while Beth set the table. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread, warm and familiar, the smell of family and home. Kevin said they were being careful now, boiling everything just like the advisory said, but admitted they had all been drinking tap water for days before the warning came out. He filled up glasses directly from the faucet, same as always. Beth laughed about it while she carried dishes to the table. She said these things were always overblown, always more panic than actual danger. She said they would probably be fine. I agreed with her. I had been drinking tap water my whole life and never gotten sick from it. Silver Lake was clean, cleaner than most water sources. The town had always been proud of its water quality. We had a pleasant dinner. Owen talked about his soccer team and the big game coming up next weekend. Grace showed me a drawing she had made at school, a picture of the family standing in front of the house with Buster and the sun shining overhead. Kevin complained about his boss at the lumber yard, same complaints he always had. Beth asked about my work and whether I was seeing anyone new. Normal family stuff, the kind of evening I look forward to all week. The only thing I noticed, and I did not think much of it at the time, was that Kevin seemed thirstier than usual. He refilled his water glass 3 or 4 times during the meal, drinking deeply each time, draining the whole glass in a few long swallows. At one point, I joked that he was going to float away if he kept drinking like that. He laughed, but there was something strange in his eyes, something I could not identify. He said he just could not seem to get enough water lately, said his mouth always felt dry no matter how much he drank. 2 days later, I visited the water treatment facility on the north shore of Silver Lake. I had a contract to inspect some of the pipes there, routine maintenance work I did a few times a year. The facility sat on a small peninsula that jutted out into the lake, a collection of concrete buildings and metal tanks surrounded by a chain-link fence. I had been there dozens of times. I knew every inch of those pipes. Nora Kimball was working that day. Nora was the water treatment supervisor, a woman in her early 50s who had been with the municipal water department for 25 years. She was smart and competent, the kind of person who took her job seriously because she understood that people's lives depended on clean water. She knew that water system almost as well as I did. Nora looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, deeper than I had ever seen them. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot in the break room. Her face was pale, and she kept glancing toward the windows that overlooked the lake, like she was checking on something, watching for something. I asked if she was okay, and her expression changed. She looked around to make sure no one else was nearby, then grabbed my arm and pulled me into her office. She closed the door and locked it. She told me, off the record, that she had never seen anything like the contamination they found. Standard tests came back normal. Every chemical within acceptable limits. Every bacteria count exactly where it should be. pH levels perfect. Chlorine levels perfect. On paper, the water was as clean as it had ever been. But something was wrong. The color was off, she said. Just slightly, just barely visible if you knew what you were looking for. A tint that should not have been there. Something between grey and green, like pond scum had been diluted down to almost nothing. And when she looked at samples under the microscope, she saw things moving. Not bacteria, not parasites, not anything she could identify or had ever seen in her 25 years of looking at water samples. Something else. Something that should not have been there. She had sent samples to the state lab, but results would take weeks. In the meantime, all she could do was issue warnings and hope people listened. She said she had not been sleeping well. Said she kept having dreams about the lake, about swimming down into the deep parts where the light did not reach, about something waiting for her in the cold and the dark. I told her she was probably just stressed. I told her it would be fine. I told her the same things I had told myself, the same things everyone tells themselves when they do not want to believe something terrible is happening. I drove to Kevin's house that evening to drop off a tool I had borrowed. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the yard, and something about the house looked different. Wrong. The curtains were drawn, even though there was still light outside. The porch light was off, and Buster was not on the porch where he always slept. The yard was silent. No sounds from inside. No television noise. No kids laughing. Just silence. Kevin answered the door, looking worse than I had ever seen him. His skin was pale, almost grayish in the dim light of the doorway. Dark circles ringed his eyes, deeper than Nora's, like he had not slept in days or maybe weeks. He was thinner than he had been just 2 days ago, like something was eating him from the inside. He said he had been having trouble sleeping, kept waking up in the middle of the night, thirsty, so thirsty he could barely think about anything else. The thirst was constant now, a need that water could not satisfy, no matter how much he drank. Beth was the same way, he said. She was in the kitchen right now, drinking another glass of water. She always had a glass in her hand these days, never put it down. I asked if they had seen a doctor. Kevin laughed, but the laugh sounded wrong, too wet, like his throat was full of fluid. He said it was probably just a bug going around, something they picked up from the kids. Nothing to worry about. Everything was fine. Speaking of the kids, Owen and Grace were in the living room, sitting in front of the television. The screen was on, but they were not watching it. Their eyes were open, staring straight ahead, but they were somewhere else, lost in thoughts I could not imagine. They did not look up when I came in. They did not even seem to notice I was there. Their skin had that same grayish tint as Kevin's, and when Grace turned her head to look at me, her eyes caught the light from the television in a way that made my stomach clench. The reflection was wrong, too bright, too flat, like looking at the eyes of a fish. I asked where Buster was. Kevin's face went strange, confused and distant, like he was trying to remember something from a long time ago. He said Buster ran away, said the dog went crazy a few days ago, barking at nothing, hiding under the bed, refusing to come inside. Then one morning, Buster was gone, just ran off into the woods and never came back. As I was leaving, I noticed the fish tank in the corner of the living room. Kevin had kept that aquarium for years, a big tank full of colorful tropical fish that the kids loved to watch. He spent hours maintaining it, checking the filters, adjusting the temperature, making sure his fish were healthy and happy. It was his hobby, his pride. The tank was still there, still full of water, but the fish were gone, every single one of them. The water was cloudy, almost milky, and something about the color reminded me of what Nora had described, that grayish-green tint that should not have been there. I asked Kevin about the fish. He got that strange distant look again, like he was having trouble focusing on my words. He said the fish died, all of them, overnight. He woke up one morning and they were floating at the top of the tank, their bodies already starting to decompose. He did not know why. He said he left them there for a while before he finally flushed them, said he kept forgetting to clean out the tank. I drove home with a bad feeling in my gut, a cold weight that settled into my stomach and would not go away. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But I did not know what it was, and I did not know how to stop it. Over the next few days, the strangeness spread through town like a disease. I started noticing changes everywhere I went. At the hardware store, the cashier I had known for 15 years served me without making eye contact. Her skin had that same grayish tint, and she moved slowly, her joints too smooth, her head turning to track me with an unsettling precision. At the gas station, a man stood by the water spigot, filling bottle after bottle, drinking each one down in long, desperate gulps before filling the next. His shirt was soaked through with water and sweat. He had been there for 20 minutes when I arrived. He was still there when I left, still drinking, still not satisfied. I went to Kevin's house for our weekly dinner, hoping things would be better, hoping I had imagined the wrongness I saw before. But nothing was normal anymore. The curtains were drawn tight against the fading daylight. The air inside the house was thick and humid, almost tropical, like the bathroom after a long hot shower. Water seemed to be everywhere, glasses on every surface, some empty, some full, some tipped over with puddles spreading across tables and countertops. The carpet was damp under my feet. Moisture beaded on the walls and dripped down in slow rivulets. The house smelled different, a smell like lake water and something else underneath, something organic and old. Kevin and Beth moved strangely. Their joints seemed too smooth, too fluid, bending in ways that made my stomach turn. Their heads tracked my movements with an eerie precision that reminded me of how fish follow things through the glass of an aquarium. Their skin had changed further, that grayish tint now covering their faces and hands. And when Beth smiled at me in greeting, her lips pulled back further than they should have, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than I remembered. Owen and Grace sat at the dinner table, not eating, just drinking glass after glass of water. Their plates were untouched. Their eyes seemed larger than before, too large for their faces. and they caught the light in ways that human eyes should not. When Owen looked at me, I could not tell if he recognized me or if he was looking at something else, something I could not see. I tried to make conversation, but every response was short and distracted. Kevin and Beth kept looking towards the window, towards the direction of the lake, like they were listening for something I could not hear. A signal, a call, something that was speaking to them in a language I did not understand. When I left, Beth followed me to the porch. She grabbed my arm, and her grip was cold and damp, clammy like the skin of something that had just come out of the water. She left a wet mark on my sleeve. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Fear, desperation. The old Beth, the real Beth, trying to break through whatever was happening to her. She opened her mouth to speak, and I leaned in, desperate to hear what she needed to tell me. Then her expression went blank. Whatever had been trying to reach me sank back down beneath the surface. She just said goodnight. She let go of my arm and went back inside without another word. And I stood on the porch alone in the gathering dark, staring at the wet handprint she had left on my skin. I could not sleep that night. Something was crawling under my skin, an alarm bell ringing somewhere deep in my brain. Around midnight, I gave up trying to rest and got in my truck. I drove through town with my headlights cutting through the darkness. The streets were empty, but the houses were not. I could see shadows moving behind curtains. Lights were on in kitchens and bathrooms, the rooms with water, while the rest of the houses stayed dark. The whole town felt wrong, felt like something pretending to be normal while something terrible happened underneath. I drove toward the lake without really deciding to. Something pulled me there, a need to see, a need to understand what was happening to my town. The public beach on the South Shore was not empty. Dozens of people stood at the water's edge. They were arranged in a rough semicircle, shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still, staring out at the black surface of the lake. No one spoke. No one moved. They just stood there, pale figures in the moonlight, their grayish skin almost glowing. Their eyes caught the starlight and reflected it back like mirrors, like the eyes of animals caught in headlights, like the eyes of things that were not quite human anymore. I recognized people, my neighbors from down the street, the cashier from the hardware store, my mail carrier who had delivered packages to my house for 10 years, the man from the gas station who had been drinking all that water. They did not acknowledge me. They did not even seem to notice I was there. They just stared at the lake with an intensity that made my skin crawl, like they were waiting for something to rise from the depths, like they were praying to something I could not see. Then I saw Kevin. He was standing near the center of the group, holding Beth's hand. Owen and Grace stood in front of them, small pale figures with those two large eyes. My brother's family, the people I loved most in this world, standing at the edge of that black water like they belonged there, like they had always belonged there. I called out to Kevin. My voice sounded wrong in the silence, too loud, too human, an intrusion into something sacred and terrible. Kevin did not respond, did not turn his head, did not give any sign that he heard me. I walked toward him, my feet crunching on the sand, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I reached out and touched his shoulder, felt how cold and damp his skin was through his shirt, and finally, he turned to look at me. His eyes were wrong. The pupils were too large, too dark, filling almost the entire eye with blackness that seemed to go on forever. And something moved in that darkness, something that was not my brother anymore, something ancient and patient looking out at me through the windows of a face I had known my entire life. Kevin smiled. His teeth were sharper than they should have been, too many of them, crowding his mouth in uneven rows. He said one word, "Soon." I backed away. I turned and ran to my truck and drove away as fast as the engine would take me. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the crowd was still standing there, motionless, staring at the lake. Then, as one, every single one of them turned to watch me go. Dozens of pale faces, dozens of reflecting eyes, all following my truck until I rounded a corner and lost sight of them. The next morning, I drove out to old Emmett Price's cabin on the east end of the lake. Emmett was in his 80s, a retired fisherman who had lived on Silver Lake his entire life. He knew the lake better than anyone, had spent decades on its waters, pulling fish from its depths. If anyone knew what was happening, what was in that water, it would be Emmett. The cabin sat at the end of a long dirt road that wound through thick forest. It was small and weathered, battered by decades of lake wind and harsh winters. Emmett opened the door before I could knock, like he had been watching for me, like he had been expecting someone to finally come asking questions. His eyes were sharp and knowing, the eyes of a man who had seen things he wished he had not seen. He invited me inside and poured coffee without asking if I wanted any. The cabin was cluttered with fishing gear and old photographs, pictures of the lake from decades past, pictures of fish and boats and people who were probably long dead now. Emmett moved slowly, deliberately, but his mind was quick. I told him what I had seen, the changes in people, the gathering at the lake, Kevin's wrong eyes and wrong smile, and that single, terrible word. Emmett listened without interrupting, nodding slowly like I was confirming something he already knew, like he had been waiting for this day for a very long time. When I finished, he told me about the lake. Silver Lake was old, he said, older than the town, older than the forest around it, maybe older than the mountains themselves. The lake was deep, much deeper than people realized. Most of it was only 30 or 40 feet, but there were places where the bottom dropped away into darkness, shafts and trenches that went down hundreds of feet into the earth. And at the bottom of those depths, there were caves, underwater caves that had never been fully explored, that went deeper still into places where no light had ever reached. Local legend said the lake was bottomless. That was not true, Emmett said, but some legends have truth at their core. Some legends are warnings disguised as stories. The old people who founded this town knew something was down there in the deep. They knew to be careful. But we had forgotten. We always forget. Emmett told me about something that happened in 1961. A group of divers came to Silver Lake to explore the deep caves. Scientists and explorers, men with expensive equipment and confident smiles. 4 of them went into the water one summer morning, descending into the depths with lights and cameras and oxygen tanks. Only one came back up. The other 3 were never found. Their bodies were never recovered. The lake just swallowed them whole. The survivor was changed, Emmett said. Not right away, but over the following weeks. He developed an unquenchable thirst that nothing could satisfy. His skin turned grey and strange. His eyes changed, growing darker, reflecting light in ways they should not have. He stopped eating food and subsisted only on water. He could not stay away from the lake. Every night he came back, swimming out towards the deep parts, diving down toward those caves where his friends had disappeared. One night, he swam out and never came back. The town called it a drowning. They put up a memorial. They told the family he must have had a cramp, must have gotten disoriented in the dark water. They moved on. But Emmett had seen the man before he disappeared. He saw what his skin had become, slick and grayish, almost scaly in certain light. He saw what his eyes had become, dark and deep and full of something that was not human anymore. He saw the way the man looked at the lake, not with fear, but with longing, with love. He knew it was not a drowning, it was a homecoming. Emmett said something had woken up down there. The construction last month, when they built the new intake pipe for the water treatment facility, had disturbed something. The new pipe went deeper than the old one, deep enough to reach those caves where the thing waited. Whatever lived down there, in the cold, dark places where no light had ever reached, it found a way out. It found a way into the water supply. It found a way into people. And now it was calling them back. I asked Emmett why he was not affected. He said he had been on a private well for 30 years, drawing his water from deep underground instead of from the lake. He had never trusted the municipal supply. Something always felt wrong about that water, he said. Something always felt too alive. Silver Creek changed fast after that. Within days, the town was unrecognizable. The streets were empty during the day because people had started hiding from the sunlight. Every house had its curtains drawn, its blinds closed. The few people I saw outside moved quickly and nervously, looking over their shoulders, jumping at shadows. The unaffected ones, the few who had not drunk the water, were terrified. They knew something was wrong, but did not understand what. The affected ones, the changed ones, were everywhere now. They moved through town at night, gathering in groups, speaking in whispers I could not understand. Their skin was grey. Their eyes reflected streetlights like mirrors. They drank constantly, always thirsty, never satisfied. I tried to warn people outside the town. I called my ex-wife to tell her not to let our daughter Lily drink any water she had not personally inspected. She thought I had lost my mind. She said Lily was fine, the water was fine, everything was fine. She said I needed to stop calling with crazy stories. She hung up on me. I called the state health department, the police, the EPA, anyone who might listen. No one believed me. The official line was that the contamination had been contained. The water was being treated. Everything was under control. Nora Kimball found me outside the closed hardware store. She looked worse than before, dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. She was shaking. She said the results came back from the state lab. They found nothing. The water tested perfectly clean by every measure they had, every test they could run. But Nora knew what she saw under that microscope. She knew what was happening to our town. Whatever was in the water was too different, too foreign, too old for our instruments to detect. It existed outside the categories we had created to understand the world. That night, I watched the gathering at the lake from the hill above the beach. There were more of them now. Hundreds, maybe. They filled the beach and spilled onto the surrounding shore, a sea of pale bodies and reflecting eyes. And they were not just standing anymore. One by one, they walked into the water. They waded out into the lake, going deeper and deeper, the black water rising past their knees, their waists, their chests. Then the water closed over their heads, and they did not come back up. They sank down into the depths without struggling, without drowning, like they were going home. I went to Kevin's house one more time. I had to try. He was my brother, the only family I had left. I had to try to reach whatever part of him might still be inside. The house was dark and damp. Water covered the floor in spreading puddles. The walls were streaked with moisture that dripped down like the house itself was sweating. The air was so humid, it was hard to breathe. The fish tank in the living room had been shattered, glass and cloudy water everywhere. I found Kevin in the bathroom. He was lying in the bathtub, fully clothed, submerged in water up to his chin. His skin had changed further, the grayish tint now covering his entire body, a texture that was not quite scales, but not quite smooth either. Something in between that made my skin crawl. His fingers had membranes between them, thin and webbed like a frog's foot. His neck had marks on it, raw red lines that looked like gills trying to form, trying to break through the skin and let him breathe underwater. Kevin opened his eyes when I came in, those dark, deep eyes that were not his anymore, eyes that belonged to something that lived in places where light could not reach. But for a moment, just a moment, I saw him, the real Kevin, my little brother who used to follow me around when we were kids, my brother who called me every Sunday just to talk, my brother who was trapped inside whatever his body was becoming, terrified and alone and trying so hard to break through. His voice was wet and gargling, barely human, words bubbling up through fluid that filled his throat. But the words were Kevin's words. "It is so beautiful down there," he said. "It is cold and dark and perfect. You should join us, Dean. You should come with us. It does not hurt. It feels like coming home." I felt tears running down my face. I reached out toward him, wanting to grab his hand, wanting to pull him out of that water and away from whatever was taking him, wanting to save him. Then the moment passed. Kevin's eyes went flat and empty, and he smiled at me with too many teeth, and whatever had looked out at me with my brother's love was gone, buried deep, maybe gone forever. I backed out of the bathroom. I heard Kevin climbing out of the tub behind me, heard wet footsteps following me to the door. But he did not chase me. When I looked back from my truck, Kevin was standing in the doorway, dripping water onto the porch, watching me with those dark, empty eyes, still wearing that wrong smile that showed too many teeth. I knew then that I had lost him, lost all of them. There was nothing left for me in Silver Creek. But before I left, I needed to see. I needed to understand what was down there, what had taken everyone I loved. I drove to the old fish processing plant at the water's edge. The building had been abandoned for 30 years, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. But the dock still extended out over the water, a wooden walkway reaching into the darkness. I walked to the end of that dock with the most powerful flashlight I could find. The lake was black and still, smooth as glass, reflecting the stars above like a dark mirror. No wind, no waves, just silence and stillness, and the feeling of something vast waiting beneath the surface. I shone the light down into the water. At first I saw nothing, just the beam disappearing into darkness, swallowed by depths that seemed to go on forever. Then I saw movement, shapes rising from below, pale bodies swimming upward toward the light. I recognized faces, my neighbors, the cashier from the hardware store, the man from the gas station, Nora Kimball, who must have finally given in and drunk the water she had been studying. They swam in ways that human bodies should not be able to move, their joints bending wrong, their limbs undulating like fins. Their eyes were open and empty, reflecting my flashlight beam back at me. They were smiling, all of them, the same smile, Kevin's smile. And then I saw my brother, Beth, Owen, and Grace, my family, swimming together in the dark water, rising toward me with those terrible smiles on their faces that were not quite faces anymore. Grace reached up toward me, her webbed fingers stretching toward the surface, and I thought I heard her voice, even though her mouth was underwater. "Join us," she seemed to say. "Join us." But that was not the worst part. Beyond them, deeper in the darkness, I saw something else, something vast, something old, a shape that filled the depths of the lake, a body so massive that what I could see was only a small part of it, pale flesh that seemed to go on forever, covered in growths and tendrils that reached up towards the swimmers above. Eyes, if they were eyes, that were larger than houses, darker than the water around them, ancient and patient and aware, looking up at me from depths that should not have existed, waiting, calling. It had been down there for longer than humans had walked the earth, longer than the mountains had stood. It had been waiting in the cold and the dark for something, for a way out, for a way in. And now it had found one. I ran. I got in my truck and I drove. I did not stop until I was 300 miles away, until the sun was coming up and I could not keep my eyes open anymore. That was 3 days ago. I do not know what happened to Silver Creek. I tried calling Emmett, but no one answered. I tried calling Nora's cell phone and got a message that the number was no longer in service. I searched the news for any mention of my town, any reports of contaminated water or missing people or strange occurrences at Silver Lake. There is nothing. No stories, no warnings, no emergency alerts. It is like Silver Creek never existed, like it was swallowed whole and the world closed over it without leaving a trace. I do not know how far the contamination has spread. Water systems are all connected. Lakes feed into rivers. Rivers feed into reservoirs. Reservoirs feed into treatment plants that serve millions of people. If something got out of Silver Lake, if it reached a river, if it made it to a larger water supply. It could be anywhere by now. It could be in the water you drink every day. It could be inside you already, changing you so slowly you do not even notice. Do not drink tap water. Do not trust municipal water supplies. Do not even trust bottled water unless you know exactly where it was sourced and can verify that it never came from a natural body of water. If you notice changes in yourself, uncontrollable thirst, sensitivity to light, skin that feels wrong, a fascination with water that you cannot explain, it may already be too late for you. If you notice changes in people around you, do not try to save them. I tried to save my brother, and all I did was watch him disappear. Just run. Get as far from any natural water source as you can. Find somewhere dry. Stay there. I dream about the lake every night, about the thing in the depths, about Kevin's face smiling up at me from the black water. I dream about swimming down toward those caves, toward that vast shape waiting in the dark, and in the dreams it feels like coming home. It feels like where I was always meant to be. Sometimes I wake up thirsty, so thirsty I can barely think. My mouth is dry and my throat aches, and all I want is water. Just one drink, just one glass. I have to remind myself not to drink. I have to remind myself that the thirst is not real. I have to believe it is not real. But every day it gets a little harder to believe. Do not drink the water. Trust nothing that comes from a natural source. And if you live near a lake, especially a deep lake, a lake that people say is bottomless, consider moving. Consider moving very far away, because something lives in the deep places, something old and hungry and patient. It has been down there since before we existed, waiting in the cold and the dark for a way inside us, and now it has found one. Stay safe, stay dry, and whatever you do, do not drink the water. I'm going to try to sleep now. I probably will not succeed, but I have to try. If I do not post again, you will know what happened to me. You will know that the thirst finally won. Tell everyone to be careful. Tell them to check their water. Tell them to watch their neighbors, their ho-ho friends, their families for signs of change. It is spreading. I can feel it. Even 300 miles away, I can feel something calling from the water, calling me back, calling all of us back to the deep, dark places where we were always meant to belong. Do not listen. Do not drink. Do not let it in. It is already in so many of us. It might already be in you.